Assalamu alaikum, which means peace be upon you. Ahlan wa sahlan, welcome to the guests. And before I go into my speech, it's traditional to open up in the name of the Creator, Almighty Allah. Inna alhamdulillah, nahmaduhu wa nasta'inu, wa nastaghfiru wa na'udhu billahi min shururi anfusina, wa min sayyiati a'malina, man yahdihillahu fala mudilla lahu, ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم. And in translation, he says, verily the praises belongs to Allah, the Creator Almighty, the one God. We praise Him and we seek His forgiveness. And we seek refuge in Him from the evil of our own actions and our own deeds, which I don't think many people really reflect on that. وَنَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ مِنْ شُرُورِ أَنفُسِنَا. Because sometimes we always look for the enemy outside of ourselves, but sometimes we can be our own worst enemy. And so we seek refuge in the Creator Almighty Allah from the evil of our own actions and our own deeds. For whomsoever He guides, truly they will be guided, because the one who gives guidance to people is not me, it's not our professors and teachers. They teach on one level, but guidance in terms of the truth and understanding of our Creator, He guides your heart to the path of truth. And whoever He guides to the truth, there's no one who can really mislead you, because if you're guided by the Creator, you see by the knowledge of the Creator, and it helps you to walk your way in life. And whomsoever He allows to go astray, meaning if you don't accept the guidance, you have that choice. Then there will be no one who else will guide you to the truth except the one who guided you to the truth. We declare and we bear witness that there is no God. There's only one. He doesn't deserve partners or associates. He's one, He's not a male or female. And we do not attribute any similarities to Him of His creation. He is the creator of the heavens and earth, the sun, the moon, and stars. He's the one that sent revelation to all the prophets. He created Adam, He created Eve. He sent the message to Noah, as people say, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, Isaac, Solomon, David, and we say the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, 1400 and some years ago, was the last prophet after Jesus, who we say Isa. And so it is very important first to ideologically clarify Islam. And I will get into the similarities between the African American struggle or the people on the continent of Africa when they were oppressed by the European slave traders. But it's very pertinent to define words, because sometimes our language becomes ambiguous. And in one thing we learned in Islam, they're critical in defining words. And what we call today etymology. And in Islam, they call it ilm al-ishtaqaq, which is the science of where words derive from. Because this is what helps to define things, so you can have a clear understanding of what things are from its root, from its elemental base. And so I put some words here, but I want to first define Islam. I say Islam first because this is what is being projected in the media as being a religion of terrorism. And most people are not going to really research Islam like a person who actually embraced Islam or practiced it. And a lot of times our minds are captured by what the media or the newspapers have said about Islam. Not really thinking that if you want to go to a mechanic, you will not go to a doctor, because the doctor can't tell you about the car. If you want to go to a person who knows how to bake cakes, you won't go to a sheep herder, because that's not his skill. So if you want to learn about Islam, CNN is not the gospel of Islam. CNN is not what defines what Islam or anything in our lives. But if our minds cannot think beyond the mainstream media or think outside the box, what I want to introduce to you today is just, I'm not trying to convince you to accept Islam. I'm not trying to convince you about my opinion, because that's not what matters. The truth is what matters. And that's what we want to get to. I thank my brother Mahdi for his wonderful introduction. And as I say, degrees and piece of paper of our education really does not define who we are. And degrees don't really measure to intelligence, because there's a difference between being well trained and being well educated. If I take a SEAL and teach him how to roll a ball on his nose and jump through a hula hoop, is he well educated or is he well trained? He's well trained, because naturally a SEAL is not created to roll balls on his nose. Those are the interventions of humans, right? And I also want to let them know that I am not noble. I am a striving human being, a servant of the Creator, trying to do and make it just like everyone else. And that includes our imperfections that we are trying to perfect to make well. So I always say, Lestu alima walakin ana talib, which means I am not a scholar. I am a student. And when it comes to Islam, I don't care how many Islamic degrees you have, you can't graduate from Islam. It's an ongoing process, learning. And once you believe that you have accomplished finishing school after your universities or after the high schools, that's when you stop learning. Our conditioning teaches us that after school, then there's no studies except for our homework. But we got to constantly keep learning, especially in the times that we're living in. So I just wanted to just make that mentioning, because it helps my ego, because I don't want to give the impression like today's society, if someone comes and stands before you with a mic, then he has to know what he's talking about. Or that's the standard of him being a truthful person. And so when we see people on TV with a suit and tie, and he's speaking, we say, well, look, he must be knowing what he's talking about. Look, he's a such and such, he has this degree. And today I don't want to make this difficult. It's about telling the truth and clarifying some issues. As I said, that Islam is from the root word silm or salm, which means peace or security. And as a religious terminology, which we call juristics, it means to surrender or to turn oneself over, or to yield or to give up one's will for the will of the Creator. Why I am really emphasizing this, because you be looking at the media on TV and you always see Islamic terrorism, always, or Islamic jihadists, or you may hear Taliban. I don't want to put those words up, but I'll define them, because a lot of people don't even know what that means. And they could make a word look like a bad word if you don't know, if you don't do no studying. So, and they look at these words and they associate it with Islam. And so we want to clarify that. And the same people who have oppressed the lands of Africa, their grandchildren today exist, and they're continuing to use the same methods that they've used in the past: conquering, divide, and manipulation, and ideological warfare. Islam is based on 5 pillars. That you believe that there's only one God. We say Allah. Allah don't mean the moon or the star. Or we talking about some other God. Allah is the personal name in Arabic that means the creator. That's his personal name. Jesus, alayhi salam, peace and blessings be upon him, he spoke Hebrew, Aramaic, another Semitic language. In his language, he never used God because that's a Greek word, a Roman word. He wasn't Roman, nor was he Greek. So he never used God. So when we say Allah, and in the Bible, they still have Ilah, Allahim, right? In the language, in some of the translations of the Hebrew books. Lately it has been mistranslated today. So when we say Allah, we're not talking about some other God which you cannot say that created this heavens and earth. It only points to one that we see in this society. So we say Allah, and when we submit to him, we believe in him and we live according to the laws, meaning 5 prayers a day. This is what the Muslim does. He prays 5 times a day at prescribed times. And he does this until his soul is taken back. And he also fasts, which is coming up on us in the month of Ramadan. 29 or 30 days from sundown to sunset. That means we wake up, our prayer is 5:30, say. We get up 5 a.m., we eat and drink, and then after that we don't eat and drink until the sunset. And most people think that's difficult. That's only because our appetites is unchecked. So we're used to eating constantly, and we think that we're going to be weak. It's not like a protest where you starve yourself. This is a discipline. To be able to fast and abstain from something that's lawful. Food and drink is lawful. Fast is not just fasting from eating and drinking, but also for people who are married. In the fasting hours, they don't have intercourse with their wives and husbands. Abstaining your desires, because what is fasting for? Is really to check your appetite, to weaken your appetite and strengthen your faith and discipline to be able to abstain from. So if you can abstain from food and drink, then we also go into the fast of the tongue, meaning abstaining from cursing, abusing people with our tongues. We shouldn't do that anyway. But particularly in this month, we fast with our tongues by not backbiting people, because we live in a world where people are gossipers who just talk about everyone. So we have to control our tongues. This is the discipline of the human being. There's 2 systems, the person system and the society system. The person system must be able to function in order for society to function. Society is not the environment. Societies are individuals who are the constituent of the environment. And if the person is not right, the environment won't be right. So people have to learn about themselves more. And sometimes because of our conditioning, we tend to pick up things from our environment. Rather it's the institutions of school, our friends, what we see on TV. The first education and institution and conditioning comes from our parents. Whatever our parents teaches us, basically that's what we'll be raised on. And if parents are not setting a great example, then the child will mirror what they see the parents say or do. It's very important to be engaged in raising your children, especially in the society that we're living in. So fasting is also part of the tongue. Abstaining from food and drink and gossiping and saying wicked things, which you should do that anyway. So this is what the other pillar is about, and giving what we call zakat. Zakat is paying your 2.5% to the needy and the poor. Now I'm showing you all this so that you could know that anytime you see something, Islamic terrorism, you're going to say, hold up, that's not true now, because now we got definitions to go along with the propaganda that's being put out there about Islam, right? So the definition is very important. So we give our 2.5% to the needy. And then the fifth pillar is making Hajj. Hajj is going to Mecca, as Al-Hajj Malik Shabazz, also known as Malcolm X, did when he found the real way of Islam. Because Islam is not the Nation of Islam and the movement of Farrakhanism or Elijah Muhammadism, because that's what it is. And not to kind of demonize him, because there are things you can learn from Farrakhan and you can learn from Elijah and things of that nature, but to associate it with Islam is a sin, because it's not Islam. It's nationalism, awareness, self-awareness, with the label Islam or label Muslim. So we want to define also why that word Islam, Istislam, means one who surrenders and submits, and the word Muslim comes from aslama, which means to submit, and the meme is a prefix to aslama, Muslim, which means one who does the surrendering, the person who's doing the rituals. That's the Muslim. So you can't judge Islam based on a Muslim, but you must judge a Muslim based on Islam. Because Islam is the deen of the Creator. Remember, it means to surrender to who? To the Creator. The Creator is perfect, but the Muslim's not. So the Muslim is the one who's supposed to live according to the laws of his Creator. Just like when Moses came with the scripture. The 10 Commandments, they lived by it. Most of them. Some of them. So even to the fact of a Muslim, even if you see something on TV that they say a Muslim did, but investigation, we don't know, still, he can't be associated with Islam in terms of application, because Islam does not promote any kind of violence. And so that's why we have to separate. Once you get a clear definition of something, then you begin to see how things are being played in the society. So Islam is about submission to the Creator, Almighty Allah. And like I said, Allah is not a person. He's not a male or female. And some people may say, then why do you say he? When you use he for him, it's not the same as genders of male and female. He, the Creator. He, the Almighty. He, the Master. It represents also an entity. You're pointing to the majesty of someone, and it just don't mean a male. It doesn't only mean a male. He doesn't only define a male, and especially when you use it with the Creator, you automatically should know that because he's not a male or female or a person, then it doesn't mean he in the grammar of English. It means he pointing to his attributes. He is the Almighty. He is the Creator. He is the Master. He is the powerful. He is the merciful. So he, the Master. He, the merciful. So again, he's not associated to anything in his creation. Nothing. We say, Alhamdulillahi alladhi manna alayna bi sihhat al-ittaqad wa tahhara qulubana man adrani shirki wal wathaniyati wal ilhad wa anqadana man darakat al-jahiliyati wa sharra wa fasad. Ahmaduhu ta'ala wa ashkuruhu wa atubu ilayhi wa astaghfiruhu jalla ana landad. We are saying, we thank the Creator for bringing us out of corruption, evil, giving us sound belief, purifying our hearts from the corruption of filth, of associating partners, and bringing us from the pit of ignorance and evil and corruption. And there is nothing unlike unto him, right? There's nothing is like unto him. He has no companions. He has no sons. He has no daughters. He is above anything that people associate to him. This is what Islam is. And it's more. So, Islam, Muslims are people of peace. Meaning, if you surrender to the Creator, of course you're going to be peace. Because you find peace within yourself. And so if you have a peaceful heart, then you'll have a peaceful application in your environment. the word terrorism, irhab in Arabic. Terrorism, we need to define it because the definition today that they've given in the media has been double standard. It's almost as if terrorism in the last 200 years have changed from its definition to at least 50 years now that they politicized this word, terrorism. So anytime you hear terrorism, you only think of who? A Muslim or an Arab or someone from the Asia. That's what they got your mind believing. But you never took the time to say, okay, what is terrorism? Look at the word terrorism, right? It is the act of protracted or spontaneous inflicting of systematic attacks and assaults and intrusions upon individuals and places within human populations with the purpose of instilling fear and trauma. The Funkin' Wagon Dictionary. That's the definition of the last 200 years, not the one that the politicians carry around in their suitcase today, and they come up with their own dictionary and give you a definition. Terrorism. So I want you to keep this in mind. As we go on, we're going to see who's really been committing the terrorism. We're going to see. And you go back to this definition. Every time we point out the terrorism that has been instituted, orchestrated, and mastered by the European slave trade, along with Christopher Criminal Columbus, because they have glorified terrorism, praised it, so much that Christopher Columbus, they celebrate his day. They got schools, they got buildings, monuments, the Capitol, as a so-called hero who was a liar and a thief and a rapist, but yet they want to say someone is a terrorist. When he came to the shores of the African land when he got lost because he didn't know where he was going, he thought he was in India, right? He didn't even know where he was going. When he was financed with weapons of mass destruction and the blessings of Ferdinand and Isabella the prostitute, who financed his voyage the first time he went, where they begin to start their exploration, but nobody called it terrorism. So during this time, the invasion of South America by the Portuguese first, and the Spaniards, the conquistador, in the 18th century, these individuals slaughtered and liquidated 56 million people. Keep that down, 56 million, right? Destabilized a people. Isn't that terrorism? It is the act of what? Protracted or spontaneous inflicting of systematic attacks and assaults and intrusions upon who? Individuals and where? Places within human populations to do what? For the purpose of instilling fear and trauma. You tell me that's not terrorism. So why is it not in the history books? Why all of a sudden what we see on TV and CNN, it's only terrorism, but yet the history of America was established on terrorism. And this is facts. It's historically proven. And still terrorism is still misrepresented because you have to count in the police brutality. When a man can put his hands up and get shot in his back like a dog, you telling me that's not terrorism? We got the definition. So why is it not said in the media that the police officers committed an act of terrorism? How come when it's so-called Muslim, and I say this with really emphasis because people don't investigate. Anything that the breaking news, big words, terrorism, alert, they got your attention. Because if you instill fear in people, they don't think. If you think you're really being attacked, you don't know. You be in fear, so you're not going to think, oh, wow. We read in the papers, right? Somebody did something, allegedly. What does allegedly mean? We already saying he's guilty. Allegedly don't mean he did it. It's a suspicion. It's assumptions. Stories that's not based on facts, allegedly. But yet, we go with the media and we say, yeah, you heard about the terrorists? Who are the terrorists? Can anyone in here tell me what a terrorist look like? What is the description of a terrorist? Besides what they planted in your minds. Because what they make you think a terrorist is a Muslim. So now everyone is looking at us, you know. But nobody defined the word. What does a terrorist? So they go, oh, the terrorist is out there. Look at the kids too. Oh, mommy, is the terrorist going to give it? Look what they done to the kids. Who are the terrorists? But we didn't even look at the definition. That gives you the definition of terrorism. Whoever commits acts like this is a terrorist. Right? So you're telling me the lynching of thousands and millions of Africans, also in the 60s, the 1700s, hanged on trees, burnt. Who in the world will burn a man in a fire and then take a picture like you on 42nd Street in New York City when we used to style? And they style and profile over a person who they burnt. But that ain't terrorism? Absolutely it's terrorism. Who takes a woman in front of his family and cut up in the pregnant woman and allow the baby to drop out just to instill fear and trauma in the man to let him know, don't challenge. And this man, you can't depend on him because he can't help you. You telling me that's not terrorism? Of course. So we up 56 million with the Spanish and the Portuguese in the 18th century. And then the coming of criminal Columbus, when he went the second time to go to the African shores, he wiped out 89 million people. 89. This is historically documented. 89 million. Keep that account. What is it called? The act of protracted or spontaneous inflicting of systematic attacks and assaults and intrusions upon individuals and places within human populations with the purpose of instilling fear and trauma. 89 million. Native Americans, over the 150 years of the period of what they call the triangle trade between the French, which is known as California now, along with the Dutch, 28 million people they liquidated. They put those slaves on ships and caged them like chickens and animals at the bottom, where most of them died, didn't even get to the places to do their slave work. Some people jumped over the ships, 23%. So that they won't be humiliated. They rather die committing suicide than to be enslaved by these slave traders. 28 million. They instilled fear and trauma, destabilized the whole nation of those people. So then you have the African, the British, the Dutch, the French, and the Spanish, right? They began to make a deal. They said, what we can do is make guns, whiskey, and boats, and do barter and trade. They use these so they can go capture the slave. So it's guns and butter. It's either guns or butter, right? So they came up with this trade, right? And during that period of time, that's why they call it the triangle trade. Africa to America, Europe back to Africa. That's a triangle. 180 million people was caged, some of them caged like animals. 180 million. Isn't that terrorism? The slave trade. And although we have not experienced the slave that our forefathers have experienced, but reading the horrific things that happened to these people, it's a shame that there are only one people who particularly denies that it even happened, or they make excuses and justify why we put these people in slavery. And in the name of the Bible, because the people who led the Crusaders, they were known as Christians. Yeah. Christians, that's why they use the cross. And even the Ku Klux Klan today is a terrorist organization, and they have not even defined them as one. And we know that Christians don't do these things. We know that. But when they say that Islam came to enslave people or to commit terrorism, they forget about the history of Islam in Africa. Why do we have a similarity? Because in Africa, there was no such religion called Christianity when the people were there. I mean, even they showed us roots. Kunta Kinte was a Muslim from the Mundigo tribe. Umar Said in the 1700s used to write Arabic, the Bible in Arabic, African, who was captured and who was a slave on those ships. The Trinity ships, the Pinta, the Nina, and the Santa Maria. These three things they had me singing in school. Like there was a real heroes. But they didn't tell us they had slaves on these ships. Many Muslims, one Muslim Luqman in the 1700s, he memorized the whole Sahih Bukhari, African American. They don't report none of this stuff. So the ancestors from 1400 and something years to Africa, Islam was already in these continents. Muslims, our forefathers, were already practicing Islam. Mansa Musa, one of the richest men in the world of Ghana, of Mali, who actually was so rich, he would carry gold, 2,400 pounds of gold. And he was so much of a kind man, he would give out the sheep and the lambs and give out gold in the Empire of Ghana. Timbuktu, what do you think that? That was the Islamic University. Who used to travel to learn? The Europeans. They used to come over there. The science that you learn in here today, who you think established the sciences, mathematics, all of that in the history of Islam. But if people just put you in slavery, they also enslave your mind. They take your religion away, they take your education away, and your culture. And so today we are morphed into a conditioning of not knowing our history and what goes with our history, and what's happening today is used again with the same methods of conquering, dividing. So now we go to the Congos in South Africa, known as the apartheid. 39 million people were slaughtered. And guess what? The United Nations accepted it for this long, allowed this to take place, and did nothing. Apartheid, South Africa. 39 million. And what was it? It was an act of protracted or spontaneous infliction, systematic attacks and assaults and intrusions upon individuals and places within human populations in order to instill fear and trauma. And that's what it did. What about the Aboriginals in Australia? How many people they wiped out? 16 million people, but nobody called it terrorism. India and China, more than 86 million were slaughtered, and yet no one called it terrorism. So we see dynamics of history. America was built up on terrorism, and they got a nerve to try to single out a people and say that the religion is terrorism. And Islam does not teach it. So now, I put up something here, the ideological warfare. The greatest masses of the people in the very bottom of their hearts tend to be corrupted rather than consciously and purposely evil. Therefore, in view of the primitive simplicity of their minds, they're more easily fall victim to a big lie than a little one, since they themselves lie at little things, but would be ashamed of lies that were too big. It's what people, we go for the big lie. You know why? People could tell you the truth and you'll call it a lie. But when somebody lies, you say it's the truth. Because there's a way of reversing the lie and the truth. And today, what happens is that we go for the big lie, right? The media lie that conditions us to make us believe something is happening and it's not happening in that way. Because no one will investigate. In Islam, we're taught not to blame someone without investigation. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu in ja'akum fasaqun bi naba'in fattabayyanu. O you who believe, if a wicked, he described them as a wicked, fasik, a person's liar, a wicked, disobedient. If a wicked person comes to you with any news, fattabayyanu, ascertain the facts. How are you going to call yourself an investigator and then you believe CNN? And you didn't do any kind of research about what's happening. How many people went to prison because somebody, or how many people believed us? You say, he did it. And just because she's your friend or he's your friend, he got your ear. So you never said, hold on, let's call him up. Ain't nobody got time to do that. But it's very detrimental, though, especially when it comes to people's lives, to accuse someone and you don't investigate what's really going on. So the news agency is the biggest liars in the world. So we need to investigate what's really happening. Or if it's the best thing that you can say is just, okay, I don't know what's going on. I ain't going to just believe what they're saying because I don't know. That's the best thing that people could say. But automatically, as soon as they put CNN, a terror attack happened. We're going to get into this. Because these terror attacks that's happening, you got to start using your mind. You really think this small group of people is a big threat for the United States of America, who brags about their army and military that spends over $487 billion on their network, that these little group of people are flying from France, flying over here, crossing and blowing up stuff. How do they get through these things? And how do these people know? How? Now, I'm not here to condone anything that's truly happening, but I need to know what is going on in the situation room. And just because a situation is projected as something happening, the situation may not be that situation. The situation may be that they're framing the situation to make the situation look like it's real. And so sometimes we have to start evaluating who's telling us this. How credible is he? The news agency, let me tell you how much money they spend on the news media. And some quotes by some journalists. The U.S. government spends more than $400 million per year to employ more than 8,000 workers to create propaganda favorable to the United States. And the result is either through cinema, 90 films per year, 12 magazines in 22 languages, and 800 hours of Voice of America programming in 37 languages, with an estimated audience of 75 million listeners, all describing the virtues of American way. They spend billions of dollars because you got to understand the media is controlled by what they call the secret government, the ones you don't see. What you see on stage, you have to puppet, right, on the strings. What we're seeing in the government today is the strings. But we don't see the string. We see the puppet on the stage, but the ones who controls the puppets. We think what we're seeing, this is really reality TV. It's not real. They call it the industrial reality industry, meaning that they try to make what's not real real. It's all part of psychological manipulation. Now, this is what David McGraw said. The results has been that an increasing authoritarian agenda has been sold to the American people by a massive multimedia machine that has become, for all intents and purpose, a propaganda organ of the state. So here goes the journalist. He says, the business of the journalist is to destroy the truth, to lie outright, to pervert and to vilify at the feet, and to sell the country for his daily bread. And he says, I am paid weekly for keeping my honest opinions out of the paper. If I allow my honest opinions to appear in one issue of my paper before 24 hours, my occupation will be gone. So they let you know they have to distort the truth. They can't give you what's going on, what's really happening. So part of this ideological warfare is that the easiest way to gain control of a population is to carry out acts of terror. The public will clamor for such laws if their personal security is threatened. Joseph Stalin. You ever heard of a false flag operation? It's a military operation that they use to contrive when they want to invade a country. It's an old trick, even to the 6th century. A man named Pisistratus, he did this. He wanted to invade Athens. So in order to invade Athens, normally people don't like war. Nobody's going to support it. So an incident has to take place, right? What they call manufactured fear, right? Manufactured fear. We're going to get into that. So what Pisistratus did is that he destroyed his own country and blamed it on the Athens. Got everybody riled up. Everybody was like, yeah, they attacked us. We got to get revenge. Everybody, oh, they did it. They blew up he blew up his own sites in particular areas, all to get Congress to sign the bill to go to war. And they signed it, and he took over Athens. Same thing like Nazi Germany in 1933. Hitler burned down the Reichstag. He did the same thing, the same trick, in order to blame it on the communists. They did it. He almost took over the world through false flag operations. It actually is a method that was used on the Navy ships, that a boat will have a flag but not its own. And so they will create a situation where they attack something, but they'll put that flag up there is a false flag. It ain't really the people who really did it. It's a flag of the ones that they want to attack. And then you say, oh, they did it. And then now everybody's going to war. The same thing in Iraq, Afghanistan. All these places were false flag operations. In order to what? When the Bush administration came into office, right? That's when 9/11 happened. And because everybody was unified before that, people were getting along. The Muslims have a vibrant community. Everybody was unified. The non-Muslims respected the Muslims. 9/11 happened, right? And when 9/11 happened, it changed the world in terms of perspective. It divided many people. So 9/11 happened. The World Trade Center was hit in New York City, where I was living. Now, they told us that some hijackers with box cutters, and Donald Rumsfeld said plastic knives, hijacked these different planes from different locations. Now, let me be real. If someone comes to rob you, how many people is on a plane with a box cutter? This is a stick-up. Now, I have a laptop. People have all kinds of things on the plane. So this is what they told us. This is the official story. They hijacked the planes with box cutters. This is what they said. This is documented. How? With a box cutter. Somebody come to you with a box cutter with his bag or his laptop. Come on. A box cutter. Now, they can always claim who's responsible for something, but when they blowed up those people in Syria, they don't know who did it. And meanwhile, they found this guy's passport at the World Trade Center and all that fire. You found a passport, really? Let me tell you what the World Trade Center was made of. 200,000 tons of steel, 425,000 cubic yards of concrete, 103 elevators. They're telling us these planes went into it, and the fire was so hot that it burnt in 10 seconds, flat down. A plane. As you can see, the plane was swallowed by the World Trade Center. And you've seen people like this, right? Asking for help. But all of a sudden, the tower that was hit first fell second. It's documented. But it fell 10 seconds free fall. You telling me fire can burn 200,000 tons of steel, 425,000 cubic yards of concrete in 10 seconds? I mean, you can even look at the video and see. It's called 9/11 in plain sight. You can go online and see it, or loose change. You can see it. And they show you how the World Trade Center drops. And you can see the detonators going off. You know, everyone knows about demolition. We got scientists in here, people who, when you see explosions coming out of every floor, that's demolition work. This thing was wired. But they told us this. They told us that these so-called hijackers stole the planes with the box cutters and ran the building and blew up the building. Now, what I'm trying to say is we need to think outside the box and start investigating, because a lot of this stuff that's going on today is the same method they used in slavery. The African-American struggle is just like the Muslim struggle. They discriminated people for their color, for their race. So now they're discriminating Muslims because we're Muslim. The only reason why they keep saying Islamic terrorism is for one objective. They're trying to destroy Islam and the Muslims. That's the bottom line. Because you keep hearing over and over, you telling me there's no Puerto Rican terrorists? Not saying that I want one, but I'm just saying, is there any Mexican terrorists? White terrorists? I mean, look at Timothy McVeigh, who was helped to blow up the Mirror building by the secret agents. And yet they say it's Al-Qaeda, CIA. First of all, anybody know what Al-Qaeda means? Most people I asked in the university say, oh, that's a terrorist group. I said, really? That's the definition? I said, okay. Anybody know what Taliban mean? They said, yeah, another terrorist group from Afghanistan. I said, okay. What is a fundamentalist? Another terrorist group. I said, brother, I said, look up the word Al-Qaeda, right? The base, or from Aqidah, what you believe. Killer don't go around putting pretty names on his back, like the Bloods and the Crips. They call them names, wicked names, because they do wicked things. Talib, is a seeker of knowledge. You are tulub, you're students who are seeking to learn. That's what Taliban means. But the media made you think there was a group really actually going around calling themselves, hey, nobody wears the shirt and say, I'm Taliban, I'm Al-Qaeda. We only heard this on CNN. We don't know these people. What school did they go to? They had to go to school. What school? Anybody know who they are? Then you have this new word today, ISIS. You know, let me just say this. Sometimes telling the truth, people think is controversial. Truth could never be controversial, but people are incontroversial with the truth because it's right there. So people are afraid, they scared. If I ain't doing anything, remember, I had a past. I used to hide from the cops because I had something to hide for. I was doing wrong. But no way in the world would I hide today when I'm telling the truth. And there's no need for me to be afraid of anybody. Why? Because Allah is in control of everything. Nothing will happen to me or you if it's not written in the decree of the Creator. Nothing. Even people gather together to do something to us. It won't happen unless the Creator wants it to happen. I believe in that 100%. We call it qadr, the decree, predestination. Nothing. No matter what I say, no matter what you do. If it's written, it's going to happen. You can't escape it. When the Creator has something for you, it's going to happen. And if He don't, ain't going to happen. It doesn't matter if I say something or not. And so sometimes we're just not ready for these particular topics. We're not ready. Because that media has so much of a control, as I said, that the most defeated mind is the one that is fed with unrealistic thoughts and can't think outside the box of the mainstream media. And some of us just, you talking about colonizing a nation? Our minds are colonized, separated from the truth, right? So, again, I already explained. I don't need to get on TV or anywhere else talking about, I'm not ISIS, I'm not a terrorist. Always they put the Muslims in this position, and I blame the Muslims, a lot of Muslim leaders, because they don't correct the terminologies. They don't get on TV and say, hold up, it ain't no such thing as Islamic terrorism. Islam is this. They don't go out there. They're afraid. They're always trying to get into the discourse of not being something. That's how your enemy puts you in the box. You don't struggle in the ground rules of your enemy. If your enemy is giving you the picket signs and the barricades, you're not struggling. You have to have your own mind and think, right? There's no such thing as Islamic terrorism. There's a such thing as terrorism, and it has nothing to do with Islam. If someone is doing it, don't say that is this. We don't need to talk about that. We need to talk about what the persons are doing without associating it with the religion. They demonize the whole 3.5 billion Muslims in the world or the religion itself. And so now ISIS comes along. See, the guy, what was his name? Zbigniew Brzezinski. He said Richard Pearl, these guys are the ones who made the project of a new American century. Get that book? I have another book called The Towers of Deception. These books are very valuable books. Oh, I didn't have it here today. Or Corporate Warriors, right? How mercenaries who are paid, contractors, do guerrilla warfare, right? In terms of these groups that we're talking about, like ISIS, everybody's talking about, oh, we're not like ISIS, right? Nobody's even asking the fact that who's behind those masks? A bank robber, right? You don't see his face. Can you identify him? No. These people are wearing masks. They put, this is called false flag. They got the flags up. One flag I seen that it was turned backwards. La ilaha illallah was backwards. And the Arabic was spelt wrong. Arabs know Arabic. Then I seen one guy, a Navy SEAL tattoo. True Muslims don't wear tattoos. Right? They got masses and they in military gear rolling across the desert in Toyota Jeeps. Toyota Jeeps. Just shh. Who lets the, so what is the meaning in the acronym of ISIS? No Muslim talks about an acronym of Islamic State. Ain't no Islamic State. And a Muslim who's striving for it don't wear shirts saying ISIS. They just implement what they believe to be the word of God. And some people misrepresent that. But at the same time, if you want to say that acronym means Islamic State of Iraq or whatever you want to say, why can't it mean Israeli Secret Intelligence Service? Why can't it mean that? Because you need to learn about that. You know, because sometimes people put labels knowing that no one's going to investigate the labels. So all of a sudden, it's Muslims who's doing it. And again, people don't go around claiming responsibility for doing something. Why you didn't trace the call? ISIS takes responsibility. Al-Qaeda takes responsibility. How? You really believe these people got time to get on the phone, to make a phone call to the news or the agency and say, we take responsibility for what happened? Come on, just think outside the box. Really. It's sad that we, in the world, like George Orwell said, newspeak, people frame the mind of thought. They colonize the mind of a person. Telling the truth in a time of deceit is a revolutionary act, he said, because everybody's lying and everybody's believing a lie. So when somebody stand up for the truth, oh, he's demonized or he's a sympathizer. So people can have a legitimate defense in terms of defending their country or defending themselves, but because they say, oh no, he's a terrorist. So people are supposed to get walked over, as in the days of slavery, they didn't want the slaves to run away from the plantation. And they will whip them with lashes because they were trying to be free. Cut their foots off from running away from their slave master. It's like you blame the one who's being lynched for defending himself against a lyncher. And Malcolm said, be careful. The media will make you think that the victims are the perpetrators and the perpetrators is the victims. And that's exactly, is nothing, it's just new. Today is the same methods they used. That's why the African American, who have not experienced slavery, but the Africans, our descendants, we can relate to the situation with the Muslims. Now that I converted to Islam, I see the same similarities because I am from the background of, as they would say, African American. I seen and know the discrimination that my grandmother used to tell me, who used to be in the time of Harriet Tubman. She lived to 105 years old. She used to tell us the stories of slavery and how the Native Americans was chopped down and brutalized and raped by the European slave trade, who today they praise as heroes, glorifying war, and then they say jihadists. What is a jihadist? Anyone knows what a jihadist is? The word jahada actually means a person who struggles. Say like you had a cigarette problem. That's jihad, because you're struggling to stop smoking. Or you have an alcohol problem. You're striving to stop drinking. A jihadist. Jihad, the American government had more jihads than anybody in the world. They're jihad in everybody else's country. And the mother of all terrorism was Nagasaki and Hiroshima. But they didn't call it terrorism. Nagasaki and Hiroshima. Right? They didn't call that terrorism. Right? Jihad, how many wars this country fought? And glorify it too. The Arabs don't have an atomic bomb. No, we don't have an atomic bomb. The biggest military in the world is being chumped by a little group, as they say. Come on. We have to think outside the box. So we look at these words, jihadists and all that. Jihad, mujahideen, is any person who struggles against anything, but at the same time, mujahideen is a person who fights in the army to defend themselves. And everyone has a right to defend themselves. That's what they tell us. They send our kids to get killed for oil, right? Joining the army to go fight for Enron, Exxon, and British Petroleum. And your children won't be working except probably at the gas station. You're not going to own them. They go sending people to war for oil and resources. False flag operation is what happened on 9/11. And so they say, people don't even want to, they got people so scared, you can't say bin Laden. Oh, he said bin Laden. Okay, I don't know bin Laden though, but they say his name. You said bin Laden did it, show me the evidence. He did it? How he pull something off like that in a cave? And how is he making these videos like some rap star? These videos coming out, you don't even hear the white guy is translating Arabic and they turn down the volume. Play the volume so we can hear. So these videos, another video came up like 50 Cent or somebody. Come on, they play with our minds. They play with our minds like this. And we believe this stuff. If stuff is going on out there, believe me, we are the first to condemn it. We don't believe in that stuff. You got these people in the desert with Rikers Island suits on, prison suits. And you got Jihadi John, so-called, who he was, with this little knife pointing in this guy's, no sweat. I mean, who has time to change into a prison suit in the middle of the desert? Tell us these beheadings and stuff like that. If there was happening, we condemn it too. It ain't got nothing to do with Islam. If there was a true ISIS, it ain't us. That ain't Islam. But the facts is that you need to investigate and stop believing everything the government tells you. Now we got Donald Trump in here, right? And there's no need to be calling him the Antichrist. He's too stupid to be the Antichrist. The Antichrist is smart. He knows how to deceive people. This guy, if you are deceived by Donald Trump, it's just because you're stupid. Really. That's too much credit. He didn't start this thing, Donald Trump. He works for somebody. So everybody's giving him too much attention. Yeah, he's doing this. No, they have that stuff in slavery. You think they put these people in slavery? How many people? That came up to 487 million that was destabilized. All those numbers? 487 million. That's terrorism. That was murdered by criminal Columbus and the British, the Dutch, the Americans. All of them was all guilty. So you think they put our grandparents into slavery for you to really be free today? That the people in the White House have policies that also signs inflicts in terrorism on other people's country? You think that they're going to allow us to be free? And they're going to tell you the truth on the history? Here it is. I mean, he's not the one he represents the corporation. Corporates run this country, Democrats and Republicans. It's naive for you to think that you can go to District 6 in your public schools and drop a piece of ballot in there and think you're going to get somebody in office. If that was the case, then why Bush had 2 terms? Donald Trump got in. Everybody hated him. If democracy truly worked, how did Donald Trump get in? If everybody hated him? Because it's not up to you. They've lied to us so many times. The same people who created democracy and the Republican system are the same people who created slavery. It's just their grandchildren today. Why is a man 70 years old want to stay in the White House or in Congress? He's an old man. He should retire. 70 years old, all those old dogs in Congress, old, about to die, still want to be in control because there's a disease for the Europeans. They want to control people's lives. And I don't mean all the Europeans. I'm talking about those who fit the script. You see? Democrat and Republican. Really? Did you ever look at the State of a Union address? And they gave us Obama. Now, I believe Obama's personally a decent man. A real decent man. Personally. but he represented the same system of the people who fought against their system. We must give honor and respect to Martin Luther King, Dr. Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Paul Robeson, all these individuals who struggled, the Black Panther movements, who they made look like a terrorist group. J. Edgar Hoover, who started COINTELPRO. Anyone know what that was about? COINTELPRO was a special operation by J. Edgar Hoover to infiltrate any movement that was trying to bring about freedom, justice, and equality. And they will infiltrate it and destroy it from within. They call it agent provocateurs. And they did it in Africa too. Why you call the house Negro and the field Negro. They did it in history. The same thing they're doing with the Muslims, right? The agent provocateur was called the buffer. In the days of slavery, what they used to do is play the light skin against the dark one. Give the light skinned one the privilege more than the dark skinned Negro, right? The slave master would rape the woman, and when it came out mulatto, he gave that one privilege, because that would be the one that will use the whip to watch out for master's slaves, as they do today. See, the house Negro syndrome is not really a black thing. No. The house Negro syndrome is people who sell out their race and sell out the truth. And so they put these agent buffer provocateurs in the slave plantation amongst the slave. So when they're about to escape, he goes and plays like he's going to be with them, and he goes back, Massa, they're about to escape. I heard them planning. They're going to leave this plantation. Hurry up, master, before they go. This is the house Negro. This is the one who got the privileges. He slept in the attic next to his master. He even wore the clothes that the master used to wear. He even ate off of the chicken bones of the master. And so if the master got sick, he wouldn't say, you sick? He said, we sick. We sick because his mind is conditioned by his master. So everything that the master did, he felt for. And when the field Negroes wanted master to die, the house Negro would say, how could you? How master treated you so well, gave you a place to stay, fed you. How dare you try to leave this plantation? Where you gonna go? Why you want to go? This is the house Negro, the agent provocateur, the buffer. And they did it with the Muslim community. Agent provocateur, stings, all these little operations where somebody come in, yeah, we're going to do this, agents. The agents send them. I went to court and actually sat in on a case where the Lebanese agent provocateur expressed his job. He said, my job is to try to make him think that something's going to happen, and then my part is to make it happen. This is what they do. And COINTELPRO was part of that in the 60s and the 50s. So the same people, the system, still represents oppression. The Constitution, obstacle number 2, racism in the Supreme Court and the legal system has been a major player in the degradation of blacks. It has exercised powers that the Constitution never gave it in order to overrule the U.S. Congress. And in the famous 1857, Dred Scott decision, this is what the Supreme Court judge said. He said, I conclude that a black man has no rights. Supreme Court Justice Tammy wrote, blacks are inferior beings, and as property, they lack citizenship and have no rights that a white man is bound to respect. This is documented. And did you know that the Constitution today says that blacks are 3/5 of a human being? It's still in there. It's still there. So you telling me, with Obama in office, the black man, that would have been the first thing that he's supposed to eradicate out of the Constitution. He didn't do it. because he works for the same slave masters that our forefathers were under their control. The White House is the place where people are hired by the corporation before you go to the schools voting Democrat or Republican. They're not the ones who control anything. People with money, it's ran by bloodline. It's always have. Rockefellers, you heard these names. Rothschild families, the Bundys, these people, bankers, Chase Manhattan, Gettys, the Bilderbergers, families, the House of England. They're worth over $100 trillion. He says, whoever controls the money controls the world. We got to wake up. We're dealing with something real serious. And it ain't Islam. It ain't Islam. It ain't the Muslims. You go to school with Muslims. You see what they do, right? The bigger picture is easy to blame some country. They blasted Syria to the Stone Ages. SubhanAllah. Nobody calls that terrorism. You seen that little kid pulling out the dirt? They buried that little baby alive. I'm not trying to make your emotions get riled up. These are facts. I just need you to start thinking that when they start pointing the finger, look at how 500,000 children in Iraq. They destroyed, bombed that city in the 90s. False flag operations are happening. Now Putin is jumping on the line. He just said, I got a news clip, a video shot. Putin just said that the United States and Israel created the ISIS. Now he's running, talking about ISIS blew up the train station. To do what? To divert the attention off of this so-called election thing, you know. Anytime they get in trouble, guess what? Breaking news, a bombing happens. Somebody under a scandal, Clinton, when Monica Lewinsky was doing him, right? What happened? Breaking news, they're making a factory of bombs in the Sifa hospital in Sudan, and where it was really pharmaceutical Similac milk. They blew it up. They blew it up. Killed all those people. False flag operations are always necessary for tyrannical leaders so that they can perpetrate the agenda, as people call the New World Order, whatever you want to call it, Illuminati. Kufr milla wahida. Kufr is one system. Disbelief, corruption, and evil is one system. And so it's very important, brothers and sisters, to be able to think outside the box and begin to evaluate information. Again, I'm not here to convince you. I'm here to give documented facts about what's taking place. And there will continue to be false flag operations, bombings here, and now we can't take the computers on the complaint from different Muslim countries and all this stuff. The bombs is going to be going off. Everything is controlled by fear. And again, all those people who were murdered in Syria, that was terrorism. It is the act of protracted or spontaneous infliction or systematic attacks and assaults and intrusions upon individuals and places within human populations with the purpose of instilling fear and trauma. And that's the history of America, fear and trauma and terrorism. I'd like to thank everyone for allowing me to be here and for coming out. And I thank all the organizations who have allowed me to come. And I will leave the rest for questions, statements, and we can go from there. If anyone have any questions or statements, you can proceed with the questions or the statements. Yes, ma'am.
So earlier you said that the media is trying to destroy Islam and Muslims. Why do you believe that they're attacking that specific group?
Well, again, when you learn about the Islamic history, you can see that Islam particularly is not a religion that's truly controlled like other dominations. Islam talks about justice and equality. For instance, we're against prostitution and gambling. We're against selling beer and liquor, even though Muslims are doing it. They're just violating Islam. We're against anything that the status quo is trying to promote in the society. And Islam preaches that no one should be governed except by the government of God. And that's something that history lets us know that they've always been trying to subdue controlled, as they call, established religion and established governments. In 1776, Adam Weishaupt was a so-called German philosopher who had an underground to destroy established religions and governments. And actually, if you look on your dollar bill, they have the symbols on the back. But the history is not written, but you have to study the history behind it. And so their purpose is to undermine established religions. Islam is basically like, we don't say that we're going to rule the world by ourselves. We say that we're under the laws of the Creator. And if you think back in religious history, Moses had to deal with the same criminal, Pharaoh. Jesus had to deal with the criminals. Every prophet, when they came with the message of God, who was the first to attack them? The government. It's all through history. They don't want the religious teachings to be established. And Islam, on this whole objective, when it's practiced right, that's why they have this problem with Islam. And it's not like we're trying to create a sympathy ploy for people. All you have to add up the math. Why everything is about a Muslim. Islamic terrorism, they're trying to destroy it ideologically. Why are you saying Islamic terrorism when we just broke down the word Islam means this, but you still keep saying Islamic terrorism? You still keep saying Islamic jihadists. Why? That's purposely done. After we corrected you, you still doing the same thing. You have intentions. They have intentions. They have motives. You see? But at the same time, Muslims are misrepresenting too. I don't want to be dogmatic. Muslims are doing some real things that's not correct. And Islam teaches us to bear witness even against our own selves. So that we got that. But overall, you're going to continue to hear this. Islam. Look at all the countries. Who they attack? They ain't going to North Korea. Huh? They ain't going to China. They definitely ain't going to Russia, the game that they're playing. Every country they're going to where? Muslims who don't have a military as strong as theirs. You don't run into a country that got nuclear warfare. You run in a country that don't have it. So they ran in Iraq after financing Iran and Iraq against each other. They gave them the weapons to fight each other, conquer and divide, same way in the slavery days, right? Same thing, right? So every Muslim country, why? Why the Muslims? Why are you always in their country? And they tell us here, we're dying, the soldiers are dying for our country. When you die in somebody else's country, you ain't dying for your country. You jumping out of the plane into somebody else's backyard and you're saying you're dying for someone. And you have the nerve to say, we're fighting the enemies. The enemy is the one who invades your home. And he takes his gun and he wants to rob you and your family. That's the enemy. But then we're the enemies. So you look at the map, you can see that it's constantly being repeated over and over. Islam is remember, the McCarthy era, right? The communist was the enemy, the new menace, right? Every phase that they don't like or they're against, they always demonize them, or we call it pseudo-speciate, always otherizing other people. You see, always making people the enemy. And basically, that's what they're doing. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
A lot of this approach is really good because it puts a really powerful historical narrative on lived experience, historical experience, oppression. I think you kind
Absolutely.
It is shocking to sort of claim, though, that 9/11 was an inside job.
Yes.
And, yeah, I don't know, like, the people that were in this room, but that is a very shocking
Absolutely.
claim. I just have to say empirically that I don't agree with.
Absolutely. And we can disagree. Absolutely.
You and I are probably age mates of a certain kind, but I think many of people in this room were not super cognizant of when that happened, being younger, but I just find that a bit problematic.
Absolutely.
I think we can describe it in interesting ways in this meta-narrative of oppression, given, again, these lived and historical experiences for Muslims of all types around the world, right? And acknowledging the diversity of Islam around the world, right? Black Islam in Harlem is not the same as Black Islam in Conakry, Cote d'Ivoire, all these places, right?
Actually, there's no such thing as black Islam. Right. Islam is Islam, and you will find every nationality, and the dominant factor of the nationality is Indonesians, not even Arabs. So, you know, Islam has no color description of it. Islam is Islam, and the people who join it is. But let me just say something about this 9/11 thing. I am not the one who says this only. And Muslims are not the ones who put out 9/11's inside job. These are Caucasian writers, even some Hasidic Jews who understand what history is about. So you know what I'm saying? So I'm not the one that put this out, but I use my own mind when I look at those films, CNN. And all I'm saying, again, I'm not telling you to believe about 9/11. You need to look at the facts of what they've said to us and how the transitions came from. For instance, I mean, we can go online right now and look at those buildings, right? The stories that they told us. For instance, we talked about, where's your evidence to? See, I don't just want to disbelieve something without having something. And I ain't going to create a theory because a theory has no facts. But once you can have a shred of evidence to something, then it's no longer a theory, it becomes a conspiracy, right? So what I'm saying is that when you look at the story they told us, box cutters, right? I go through the airport. I travel. That these people got past the guards with box cutters, got on the plane, and they robbed these planes. This is the story. This is not my story. That's the story that they gave us. The official story. The official story. These are our so-called politicians and journalists. They said that these people from Saudi Arabia. In fact, did you know that 8 of them were still alive? The ones that they said hijacked the plane? That people had to go to the embassy to recover their passports because they were lost. This is the story of the official story. Thank you, sir. The official story, right, is that they're the ones that told us these people came and with box cutters. I looked at the video. I seen the video. For me, it's clear. Like I said, I'm not trying to convince anyone. You look at the videos yourself and the story that they've told us, and you do the math. Of course, I know this is going to be shocking for the people who live in America. They're so grassrooted. They can know all the stuff that America did, but they're in denial about their country still. No one wants to believe, they couldn't have did it. Again, here we're going to condemn Donald Trump, who works for the system, but yet we're going to say, that couldn't have really happened. It couldn't have been an inside job. And history tells us they have done inside jobs many times, right? So it's a shocking thing for people who love America, meaning the system. When you're conditioned, you can't. It's hard to believe this. And the people who are writing this, I don't get none of this from Muslims. These books are all from non-Muslims. All these books from non-Muslims. All these, look, Chris Hayes, A Colonized Nation, all of these books from non-Muslims. They're the ones saying it. They're the ones who open their eyes and their share. In fact, they're more brave. They're not, Muslims are not saying this stuff. They're out there. This another book by Jeffrey Grump, The Corporations, right? They're the ones that are saying this stuff. They're writing about these things because they're not stupid. They analyze, they understand. So, of course, the average people who are living in America who believe still that they're here for justice and equality is going to be shocking. They're going to be, I got to go. That's it. I told you, truth is going to be controversial only because people are in controversy with the truth. You see? This lady, you had a hand up. Absolutely. Absolutely. Appreciate that. Okay. Okay.
My question was, what was the determining factor that made you convert from Christianity?
Yes. Let me just first say I appreciate my grandmother and aunts who taught me Christianity. They helped me to believe in a God. And their principles were very sound back then. The Christianity back then is that they really particularly followed, we couldn't even have a girlfriend. Girls couldn't sit on our porches. They really followed it. They really followed the way that, Christianity had the principles. So I give my appreciation to my family and the Christian background. As I grew up and began to question not Christians, people's hearts, I questioned the people who concocted the Bible, the King James Version particularly, because that's the worldwide book that they've given us. I questioned who King James were and why his name is on the Bible. So I studied his biography, King James. 17th century, 16th century king who was a homosexual, and basically I'm saying, who is King James, right? And I seen the similarities in Christianity and Islam as a puzzle. Christianity, right, taught us about God, taught us about Jesus, the miraculous birth, all of that I've seen that in the Quran. I compared, I said, okay, the concept of believing Jesus is the problem. I've never truly believed that Jesus was the Son of God, literally like people are saying. And most people say, well, that's wrong because if you don't accept the Son, you don't believe in God. But my concept was that, okay, if God is not a man, right? Jesus was a man. He was born miraculously from the womb of Mary. He was a baby. He drank milk, right? He ate food. He slept. He went to the bathroom. I could never attribute that to God because God don't need to eat, drink, and he'll go into the bathroom. Jesus was, to us, a prophet. And it's mentioned in the Bible, too, that he was a great prophet before the people of Galilee, right? It's there. Jesus makes distinguish in the Bible. He says, think not that I do the miracles by my own, but I do it by the one who's in heaven. The woman came to him and said, oh, good master. He said, why do you call me good master? There's no one master except God. Another distinction, right? He told the children, hear, O Israel, the first commandment, worship my Lord and your Lord. Another distinction, right? So even in the Bible, there's stuff in there that leads to when I read the Quran and the story, what made me convert was the story of Maryam. It's in Quran. Everyone knows the story of Maryam. It's in the Quran, chapter 19. A guy just told me the story, which made my heart feel like, I can't even express the feeling, but the feeling I got, this is the truth. And the people lied. Again, we talked about slavery. You think these people, after colonizing America, this is by Dr. Henry Clark, Christopher Columbus and the African Holocaust, that these people, after doing all what they're doing, took your religion away from you, took your culture, miseducate you, all of a sudden you think their grandchildren are going to give you the right religion now? Come on. After all that? So when I search Islam, it has like a puzzle. It's like I read a chapter in the Bible. Jesus says, I must go now. If I don't go, the comforter won't come. And of course, they use the words different, paraklito, comforter, counselor, different translations. But we know that's talking about a prophet. If I don't go, he won't come. But if he goes, if I go, he will come and he will teach you all the truth. And he will judge the people for their sins and their wrong. I seen that as Muhammad. And I read about the Muhammad's characteristics of that description. I read about the description Moses was given the Canaanites. He says he was with the children of Israel, right? He says the children of Israel, your brethren, don't worry. He will come. There will be someone who will be raised as a prophet who will have a book like I came with you, the law, and he will come with a law as well. And we read the lifestyle of Muhammad and we'll see. So that's basically, I could go to a longer story of how I converted, but this is one of the things that made me convert. And I've seen it as a continuation, as a last revelation of accepting. And then I studied history more, and I've seen that our great-great-great-great-grandparents were Muslim in Africa. If people trace their lineage, they will see that they're from either one of those tribes of Africa. And Islam was there already. Before criminal Columbus came, before the Portuguese came, the religion of Islam was there. This concept of Christianity came when they came with their false religion and their diseases and their biological warfare. It was there already. And so many people find their roots through that way and knew that, like one of my coworkers, she studied her background. She said, wow, I'm from the Ghana tribe. And then they said they were Muslim. She's Christian now. She's Christian, but she said she took got her bloodline and everything. She said it led me to a tribe in Ghana. And the people who were in Ghana, they were Muslim. So it's historically there. It's just covered up with a bunch of lies. And that's what made me convert.
I was listening to what the professor was talking about, the colonization of the mind, and I guess that's why we think of different things. But it didn't seem like he had that same issue because he based it just on a feeling that, oh, I don't believe that it's not true. But when you brought the facts of, okay, just use your common sense about somebody robbing you, I'd rather get cut than fly out a plane. So
you see how
and that's your choice to get cut or to crash. I mean, I don't. So to him to say, well, he just didn't believe it is that what the colonizing mind is?
absolutely. And there's the double standard is that you can believe all the horrific things, slavery, killing, hanging, you believe all that, but no, I don't believe there was an inside job. After all those facts, historical facts, you know what psychological impairment is? Is when a person has proof of evidences to something and the person just wants to believe in something just because he wants it to exist or not. This is what, I mean, and it's not us who's putting this, it's not me who said the plastic knives in the box cutter, the robber plane. I use logic. Logic is this. Us from the street, ain't nobody coming with no box cutter to rob me even in the street. Less than saying a plane with about 70, 80 people. Ain't nobody gonna rob me with no box cutter. Nobody gonna rob me with no box cutter. And no people on the plane ain't gonna allow that some Arab come on the plane, yeah, okay, I'm going in the cocktail, I'm taking over and drive the plane into a building. That is not logical. That's their official story. That's not my story. People went for it. The planes, I mean, it's clear. I suggest you look at, for those who are not believers, look at the tapes. You can see it. You can see it. A 757 puts a 16-foot hole in the Pentagon. You know what a 757 is? A 16-foot hole, it would have smashed the Pentagon. And then when they're on the site, I looked at it. Everyone's looking around, the fire department. There's no suitcases. There's no blood. There's no ambulance that's taking the people. A 16-foot hole, a 757 would have smashed the building. Really. And did a real nice curve and then crashed into it. Now you look at the video, you could see one of those drones hit the Pentagon. Clearly you could see it. Type in 9/11 in plain sight and watch it. Those tapes are documents from CNN. They're not people who, like they did with bin Laden, making him say stuff and pop up over here and pop over there. These are CNN official tapes. And guess who put it out? A white guy named, I forgot his name, a radio show guy. He didn't believe in it until he got the tapes from CNN, and he made the tape called 9/11 in plain sight because he didn't believe just like he didn't believe. But he had to evaluate. He investigated. Let me look at these tapes. And so he made it into a documentation. If after documentation shows you the proof and you still say, nah, I don't believe, you're just in denial. Some people won't admit about slavery. Why? Because either they come from the culture of European and they feel guilty by association of being white. So they don't want to admit. It's no longer time for us to only say police brutality, black on black crime and all that. It's up to those same European people who identify the same thing that blacks see to stand up and start protesting. You don't see them take the forefront except for a lot of other ones on the back. But these other political pundits, they don't do it. It's no longer time for us. We know our struggle. We know what we're being oppressed by. Now it's time for the people who identify with it to stand up and say the same thing. Because it's clear, oppression is wrong anywhere by anybody, right? So, of course, I knew people will get that. Now, and I thought, after all the stuff today, I thought people already was woken up by 9/11 tapes. I thought everyone knew that that was a fraud. I thought everyone knew that it was an inside job. People are not still disillusioned, you know. So when someone says that I don't believe something, that means you have the evidence other than what I'm saying. You're supposed to say, okay, the reason why I don't believe is because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can't just say I don't believe something. You can't just say, well, God, I don't believe in God, like that's going to stop him from existing. The truth is the truth. You see, the thing about us as humans, we always quick to say something didn't happen, but we have no proof to prove why we're saying it. I have proof. I projected some proof here. You know, proof is no more of a theory once we know that things take place and happen in our environment. It's proof. And again, like she said, the colonized mind, here it is, you can admit majority of the stuff that I said, he admitted it, it's true. But the inside job, that's why people walked out. So we believe in half of the oppressor. The oppressor, yeah, he oppresses, but he didn't do this. He can hang someone, burn someone, drop a nuclear bomb on someone, but he won't do an inside job on his own people. How you don't believe that? That's the colonized mind again. You know, we call it selective outrage. You're selective in your injustices. Well, I won't go that far. Because to say that it was an inside job is to say that the government that you believe in and the system that you believe in is a failure, and they don't want to say that right now. Because they still believe in the system. They still believe that there's going to be a hero that's going to come in the White House and change things. And here it is, Donald Trump is right in their face. Someone who he didn't want to be in office got there, and we need to say, then what is the system really about? You see, so again, these books are by no Muslims. None of these books, except this one, and I didn't even use this. This is my own personal. All of these books are by non-Muslims, all of them. And I have a whole chest full of them, of non-Muslims, who come up with this information, they put it out there. Some governments resign, some leaders, they get out of there and they tell the truth. What's his name that did the story in Iraq? I can't remember his name. But he was the first one. He made the book Fire This Time. He was the first one to expose what the American government did to Iraqi people. They massacred them. They were worse than Genghis Khan, the Americans, when they went in there. They wiped it out. And he was the first to protest against it. So these are people of different, and they're probably not even of religions. They just have a mind and they study. Questions? Statement? Yeah. Okay.
No, I was just saying, so when you put it all together, it's, you know, you're talking about other people who need to accept it, but it's our own people as Muslims and African Americans that we don't accept it, and that's the big issue, because that's why we can't move forward. Because you'll have somebody who, you know, you talk about Black Lives Matter, and then they'll say, well, all lives matters, or they'll say, well,
Yes.
kill black people too. Like,
Right.
what does that have to do with
Right.
anything? I despise this black man this black kid who killed my friend, but I don't mean that you should shoot unarmed men. I mean,
This is a great point.
I don't understand how we could get together in the framing of the mind, or just like Muslims say, well, these Muslims are doing, like, what Muslims are ISIS? Where they come from? What mass shit did they go to? How you know they ISIS? Why are you gonna say they're ISIS and say that they're Muslims and you don't know that they're Muslims? So how do we gather our minds together for ourselves first?
This is a good point. That's what happened. Black Lives Matter. It's not for somebody of a nationality to say, all lives matter. That ain't the issue. Because what's happening is that the Black Lives Matter is not mattering to the people who are slaughtering them. Nobody's talking about you on the sideline who your lives are not being taken. So they misrepresent that. Black Lives Matter. You know, it's about police brutality, how they was killing, they killed, murdered, and slaughtered, terrorism. 486 black men died in 2015 by police, just alone in 2015. Just alone, you telling me that ain't terrorism, and that issue needs to be addressed. And it is. The Muslims, like you said, it's the Muslims who's also in disbelief too, you know, and blacks always saying, well, this ain't happened. Because it was some black people, yeah, we all to get along. We need to all get along. We respect some of the police officers because they ain't all bad. That's not the issue. The issue is that these police are killing black people. Stick to the issue. That's the issue. How you going to address that? When the president of the United States can't deal with the local situation, we're in bad shape. None of the police, nothing happened to them. That's terrorism, and racism still exists. And I don't think racism is really about color. I think the Europeans have an inferiority complex about people who are great. Because who would want to put signs to say, well, this bathroom is for blacks and this bathroom for white, and everybody's defecation and urine stinks? I think it's just when someone knows someone's great, they do anything to demonize them. It's a complex. They'll do anything to crush so that people won't see the greatness of the people. Because race is more than the color. It's really about power. We can't be racist because we never controlled or owned, except for our grandparents, anything to control people's lives. Racism is more about a power struck. People who wants to take over people's lives, you know, because if that was the case, you wouldn't see interracial marriages because of the color. It would be really black is not good. It's people who manufactured the concept of racism and made people buy into it. And so it became an issue off of the issue that it's really, really about. You know, Pharaoh, he was black. He didn't care about the children of Israel. He was the same color. It was about power and domination. That's all the Europeans just took slavery to another level. Because the beginning of capitalism was in 1400s. That's where capitalism started, off of the backs of people. You see? So people, again, they want to selective outrage. They agree with you about all the horrific things, but deny that it was an inside job on 9/11. Because maybe you just want to believe it was some Muslims and terrorists. You just want to believe that. That's psychological impairment. You want to believe it because you just want it without evidence. You just saying it. I don't believe it. Okay, tell me why you don't believe it. Can you come up to demonstrate? Tell me why. We should always be able to prove what we say and what we deny. You got to do that. You can't just say, I don't believe it. That don't make it mean that it didn't happen because you say you don't believe in it. It's okay. You could disagree, but disagree intelligently. You walk away, if people walk out, hey, that's because you're in denial. That's one of the things. We don't want to look in the mirror, except from the physical level and see how good we look, but we don't want to look inside ourselves. Because sometimes we be having biases there, and some topics bring it out, you see, and they cover up, you see. And it's just that way. I expected that. You know, that's why I started off saying truth can't be controversial. It can't. Truth can never be controversial. Don't let anyone put you in a position that, because you telling the truth, put you in a position like you doing something wrong. You just in controversial with the truth. You just don't want to hear it. And that's the bottom line of it, you know. So even Muslims, sometimes they walk out because they're scared. They think that especially at this day and time, the ban is coming on them. They think that Donald is going to come in here and get the agents to bring them back to the country and stuff like that. They don't. It's a shame that we go through the airport, right? Every day we go through there. And the hype is not really like the TV when you actually go there. Although they're doing the shakedown, doing like that, but it's not as hype as the TV. You hear, I'm watching everyone to see if they really buying into it. I see the customs and the TSS, they talk. They ain't really on no real alert like the TV is making you, right? I watch them. I watch their body language. Okay, go ahead through. And they talking, you know. It's again, one of the things that Pharaoh did is he controlled people through fear, magic, and sorcery. It's the same. Put fear into people's heart and strike fear in their hearts. Make them fear, bewitch them, like deceive them. Those are the three things. Remember back in the red alert, green alert, orange alert. We're on the orange alert. Red alert, green alert, orange alert, back and forth. Fear. Everything is in big letters because they understand the nature of the human being that when you put them on alert, when they don't know something, they fear it. So Pharaoh used the most powerful tools, fear. The magicians, like the media, is like the Pharaoh who make the ropes look like snakes. They make the falsehood look real and the real look false. That's part of Ad-Dajjal. They call it Antichrist. He will make falsehood look real and truth look fake. That's what he will come with. He will be able to, we call it shubuhat. Fitnatu shubuhat or fitnatu shahawat. These are two diseases of society where people have a dubious perception of reality. Shubuhat, right? People can't be able to decipher the truth from falsehood. The liar will believe and the truthful will be disbelieved. The honest person will be condemned and the liar will be praised. Christopher Columbus, they want to still celebrate him and glorify war. And they know that they're criminals. Why can't we just have our day? It's with the Italians. No, he's a great man. Forget about it. Forget about it. Yeah. But he's a killer. So, well, we thank the Creator for opening up our eyes. Go ahead, miss.
In your opinion, how do you think all this is affecting Muslims and religion itself? Do you think people are leaving their religion? Are they less likely to convert, even though they want to, because of the stigma behind it?
To say this fairly, if the Muslims are leaving the religion, it's not because of this. It's because there's something in them already that was already weak and feeble. Because, like I said, whosoever God guides, no one can misguide them. And whoever he allows to go astray, no one can guide them. People, and it's because they're leaving the religion through application. The Muslims. We have a tradition that says, one of the signs of the last day is that Islam will only be known in name. And the Quran will just be like a script, like a part that they recite. And the masjids will be decorated big in silver and gold, but less guidance, right? And basically, this is how Muslims are leaving this Islam. They keep the names, they keep their traditions, but they're not practicing the way that the Quran teaches them to practice. So all of this is just a test. And our Creator says, do you think you say you can believe without being tested? For surely you will hear much of the people of the book who will say things out of their mouths, right? These are tests that Muslims are failing because they have weak faith. So they're leaving, not because, I won't blame because of what's happening, because even all of this stuff, when we look into the history of the Sahabas, there are people in the time of the Prophet, right, that they were put in ditches by the Arab pagans, put in ditches in the hot sun, and they took a saw and sawed his body in half, and that didn't even make them turn against their religion. People who are going through much worse than what the Muslims are going through today. You had one person who took a rake, one of the pagan Arabs in the time of the Prophet, and raked his skin alive where you could see his intestines. And he said, Ahad, which means one God. He didn't turn against his religion. So you compare those persecutions with people just calling you ragheads and ninjas and terrorists, and you're going to run away from your religion? No, it's something that you're using for an excuse because there's something in you that you're just not practicing. So it affects the Muslims, yes. And there's the other point is, I say that if you are in America as an immigrant or a migrator from another country, and the country's environment causes you to mispractice Islam, it will be better for you to stay in your country, to keep the fortress of the deen, to come here and lose it, right? So what we're saying is that what we see too in our communities, African American communities, that there's a lot of immigrants from the Middle East, the Arabs on the corners selling beer, selling pork, selling cigarettes and all that, and they associate themselves with Islam. So here it is, they're destroying potential Muslims in the neighborhood because they're selling that stuff, destroying the neighborhoods off of the backs and blood and sweat off of other African American heroes who made it possible for them to come to this country and set up shop. And yet we set up shop for unlawful things as Muslims. So for your question, no, the Muslims they're just misrepresenting Islam. And we have to tell the truth about that. Why? Because the Quran talks about these things and we're not biased. You Muslim, you're doing wrong, it condemns you too. And of course, forgiveness is always there, but the person has to have the intentions to change his life. Change his life and be sincere. You know, so yes, no, these are tests for all of us, you know. As an African American, my father is from Jamaica, but I still associate myself with the descendants of Africa because everybody did, right? But I go through these situations, I see all the discrimination. It doesn't really bother me because I know how to talk. I know how to make you want me to fly through the machine. You see, you don't want to search me. You know why? Because I know how to talk. You know, I'm not going to be disrespectful, but I'll give you a speech. You know, so it really doesn't affect me. I see the discrimination. Hey, that's my brother right there. This is my brother, Mr. K. Smooth. We go back like 30, 40 years. We grew up in the most atrocious times. You wouldn't want to know us back then. Yeah, so he was, you know, back in the days, man. He's like my brother. We grew up together. And he can tell you, I wasn't always like I am today. So I want to be truthful. I don't want to talk like I'm this halo over my head, like I'm the person who just ready-made. No, I went through turmoil and struggle. I was on the other side of the fence, me and him, partners in crime, you know. My experience became my best teacher. So now I'm helping people where I used to be. I go to the prisons. I help the same people. I do the counseling. You know, prison educated me, right? No, I educated prison because I didn't let the time do me. I did the time, but I did it constructively. And when I came out, this is what I'm doing now. for all those years. I come back now talking before the judges who used to convict me. I advocate for people who may be going to prison. They didn't listen to me before, now they listen to me now. You see? So most people condemn people. I met the most brilliant minds in prison. I had met a guy named Muhammad Johnson. He had 8 PhDs, more than the warden. They kept him in prison over and over and over and over so that he can help them out. Seriously, you know, the most brilliant minds of people who came in out of there and came out and made a difference. And so basically that's some of the stories. I've had many miracle stories I had. I was kidnapped 3 times, you know. I mean, I had a miracle story. I was kidnapped and tied up in a chair with extension cord. I mean, I was saying, oh God, please help me. If you get me out of this, I'll do something for you today. I remember being tied up with blindfolds and Russian roulette being played. And I tell you, one thing, I woke up the next morning, the ropes were loose. I didn't loosen them, but I got out of there. And I know that was God. I know that was Allah who saved my life. There was a purpose for me to be here, doing what I do now, and from darkness into light. So I have nothing to like try to convince people to make Islam look so glorious and things. Islam is already glorious. Muslims is another story, you know. And although we may be dirty and bruised up, one thing, we still are here. And Muslims are going to stay here, no matter what they do. They can blow out the light and try, but it won't. It won't go out. And we're not here to put fear in people or to convert people with the sword, false history. You know, nobody's here to convert you. You know, we're here to explain what Islam is. You know, we respect the people of the book, Christians, Jews, whoever they are, we respect them.